SportsNetwork.com, joins me for a look at what the Eagles have done and what they could do and much, much more on NFL free agency. You know, last week seemed like there wasn't a whole heck of a lot, John, going on. That changed pretty quickly.
Yeah, it did. Anytime you see trades in the NFL, you're always a bit surprised just because that's not the nature of the business. And, to have such a high-profile trade, obviously Shady McCoy going to Buffalo, that's a big deal, not only in Philadelphia but around the league. So, give Chip Kelly credit. He's got a vision, and he's going to go forward with it. And, you can argue points for it, against it, but at least he believes in himself, and that to me, at the very core of the matter, shows something because he believes in the system, he believes in what he's doing.
Well, over at SportsNetwork.com, John, you write that the Eagles are on the fast track to dysfunction. It seems like you're a little leery of what this Chip Kelly era, how the personnel director, Chip Kelly anyway, era has started.
Well, I'm leery about the front office dysfunction because it's pretty clear that Chip Kelly and Howie Roseman don't get along, but it's pretty clear that Jeffrey Lurie's kind of hedging his bets. So keeping, Roseman in the organization. I mean, generally when you lose a power struggle, and Howie's won plenty of them, you can go down the list of names, high-profile executives in this league that he has beaten in power struggles, and all of them left the organization. Here, he loses one, and he's still in the organization. They got to move him, to the other side of the Novocaire complex. I mean, how are these two going to work together? And to me, that part of it is the dysfunction. It's Howie Roseman at the Sports Analytics Conference in Boston kind of, put his theory out there, and the fact that he doesn't agree with mortgaging the future for one player. Generally, historically, he's been correct. More often than not, it doesn't work. And I think that was his way of saying, hey, if this doesn't work, don't blame me. This is Chip Kelly. It's just not a good working environment. I mean, I don't know how the Eagles can spin it in any other way, how Jeffrey Lurie can spin it when you have two guys in high-profile positions who don't get along.
John McMullen, the NFL editor, SportsNetwork.com. What did you think of the deal? I mean, ultimately, you got a 27-year-old running back making $12 million and a third-year linebacker who missed an entire season with ACL tear. Ultimately, what did you think of the deal for Philadelphia?
Well, I love the deal for the Eagles. I think it was a tremendous deal, almost a baseball-like deal in the fact that you get a young player who doesn't make a lot of money, and you kind of dump the big salary on the Bills. And it was a player, dating back to last season. You saw the same thing with Kerry Williams when he spoke out about, the practices and how up-tempo they were, and you kind of knew, okay, that's the end of Kerry Williams. It might not be today. We said at the time, but after the season, he was going to be gone, sure enough. Same thing with Shady McCoy. If you think back to the season, if you think back to some of those clandestine remarks about him not hitting the hole, him not going north and south, kind of dancing around, and key parts of this season and key aspects of certain games, Shady McCoy was on the sidelines, and Darren Sproles was in the game. So I think that gave you an indication of what Chip Kelly thought of his game. And he's a big name that was descending as a player, did not have a very good season. I kind of snicker at people who use Pro Football Focus as a gospel, but nonetheless, I think they do good work, and I think they had him rated as the third worst tailback in football last year. He did not play well last season. And when you add into the fact that he's scheduled to make what he's scheduled to make, over $10 million, this to me was a heck of a deal for the Eagles.
John, ultimately, now they don't have a lead back right now. Does that matter? I mean, can they go into a season with Chris Polk, Darren Sproles, and then a rookie or some free agent? Or would you anticipate them going to get a more veteran, I don't want to say more veteran, but one of these free agents that might be considerably less money than McCoy?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to bring somebody in. Chris Polk's not going to be the starting running back of this team. So, you could see almost a de facto trade with Fight. You could see a guy like C.J. Spiller coming in for much less money and being kind of the explosive back they need. The draft could be another avenue they use because it's very deep as far as running backs go. And the mentality of the NFL is you can find a guy now in the second or third round that can help you. And it's, the devaluation of the position as a whole. The same thing's going on in Minnesota. The Vikings have to wonder whether they want to pay Adrian Peterson all the money that he's owed this season. You're talking about a future Hall of Famer there. And people aren't sold on that because, the position as a whole just isn't as important as it used to be. So it makes a lot of sense for the Eagles to move on from that contract, number one. And secondly, I don't think Chip Kelly was a fan of his running style at all. So I think he got an ascending player. I know he's coming off an ACL injury, and that's always a concern. But as a rookie, Alonzo was, Rookie of the Year by the Pro Football Writers. So he played at a very high level. He's a guy, obviously, he's very familiar with. I'm like a lot of people. I think it's kind of silly with this Oregon nonsense and constantly bringing in people. But this is one guy who is legitimately a big-time player from Oregon. So I don't have as big as a problem with that.
Where do you see him fitting in? I mean, the Eagles have two guys that play on the inside. They may or may not bring or have Ryans healthy, I guess. But, I mean, if he is back and he's healthy, how do you see Kendricks, Ryans, and Alonzo fitting in together?
I don't. I don't think D'Amico Ryans is going to be back. I don't think that pretty much sealed his fate that Alonzo is going to step right in and going to be next to Kendricks as the inside linebackers in that defense. And I think it's a good move. You have two very young ascending players now, and as good as D'Amico Ryans was last year before the injury, you have to enter that in the equation. He has a big cap number. So, if the Eagles move the way I think they're going to go and get rid of D'Amico, they could even get rid of Evan Mathis. I think that might be an off-the-radar possible move. They might have all of a sudden over $50 million in salary cap room, and they're up there with the Jacksonville Jaguars, Oakland Raiders, Cleveland Browns as teams that basically can do whatever they want as far as looking at free agents.
All right, then what free agents make sense? I know Maxwell's name's brought up a lot. Now McCourty's out on the table there, and obviously that's two areas of need for Philadelphia. Is this simple? Those two are the guys, or do you see another way that Chip Kelly's mind could be working here?
Well, I think those two are the guys defensively. I think people, some people have floated out the name Ndamukong Suh. I just don't think he's a fit for their type of defense and their scheme. I mean, he's just a natural 4-3 under tackle. He's such a dominant interior player. I think you would be wasting him in a 3-4 scheme where he'd be asked to take on two blockers instead of being just a dominant player. So I think that those people are barking up the wrong tree. Darrelle Revis obviously is the best cornerback in football. That's pie in the sky type stuff. They'll have money, but you have to also enter in the equation age, injury history, the fact that he always seems to be upset with his contract. So I think it's much more likely to go after a guy like Maxwell who they can, spend the money with anyone. They can bring him in if they want to. And McCourty makes a lot of sense. But anytime you're dealing with trying to pilfer people away from the Patriots, that's difficult because such success there in the program they build up. There's a lot of people that are willing to give hometown discounts to the Patriots.
Let's look at Maclin's situation. A lot of people thought it'd be a slam dunk, John. I know we've talked in the past about him. It seems that as the days roll on, less and less certainty on whether Maclin would be back. And if he's not back, where are they replacing him? Via free agency, or are they going to try to go through the draft and go with, Jordan Matthews as really their lead guy?
I would think they're going to bring in a veteran, whether they bring back Maclin or maybe a Randall, Cobb, somebody like that. They have to bring in somebody with who's proven. I don't think you can just go into the draft and say you're going to replace that kind of production. Even last year, and last year's wide receivers class was historically great, and this year's is very deep as well. But to count on guys just to hit the ground running, I think that's not a very good game plan to tackle that position. And you never know with Chip. I mean, there's certain players, obviously Shady McCoy being the most notable, that fans look at as a superstar, and he doesn't think much of them at all. So I think it spoke volumes, the fact that the Eagles obviously didn't place the franchise tag on Maclin, didn't place the transition tag on him, and they're going to let him get to free agency and kind of see what his value is around the league. And that could be a clear indication that maybe he likes a player like Randall Cobb more than Jeremy Maclin.
We're talking with NFL editor John McMullen, SportsNetwork.com. I think a lot of people would not be shocked at anything that Chip Kelly does at this stage of the game. But, John, a lot of people have said, look, I applaud him. He's got a plan, and he's not afraid to do anything. But do you think this plan is too reckless? Is he being too reckless? Because there are some people who believe that there could be some leery free agents out there of coming to Philadelphia. Hey, if I have a great season and I'm 27, I'm supposed to be in my prime, and this guy's cut 2 guys. So why would I want to go there? Do you think people are leery of Philadelphia because of this?
I don't think so yet. I mean, the shoe that hasn't dropped is Mariota. If he goes all in and mortgages the future, I can't put a stamp on that. I think that's a disastrous move. But we'll see how that plays out. As far as the moves with the veterans, to this point, I think it's made a lot of sense. I mean, we all talked about Shady McCoy, just because of the high cap number, it was going to be a concern. He was going to have to redo his deal or the Eagles were going to move on. Similar with Trent Cole. I mean, Trent Cole is a very productive player for the Eagles, but, he's past, I think he's 32 now, huge cap number. I mean, that happens all around the league. That's just the nature of this game. Same thing with Todd Harriman. So a lot of these situations were just that's at the point of the careers where these players were, and if they didn't renegotiate a deal, didn't come down, they were going to move on. You saw a similar situation in Arizona with Darnell Dockett, who was a tremendous player for them for years. So it goes on throughout the league. That part of it I don't think is an issue. But if you tell me he's going to give up 3 or 4 number ones and Lane Johnson or Fletcher Cox or Marcus Mariota, then I'll turn. I'll say that's reckless.
Well, it seems that every day there is some other source or report out there, John, suggesting that he wants Mariota. A new one today. Philadelphia would make that move and pay the price. We're talking multiple picks in a player. The source said the Jets would be open to moving the pick, and the Eagles have internally prepared to move up in the draft. They are contingencies in place, and they know that Mariota is the perfect fit. The source said with 100% certainty that if Mariota is available at number 6, it will be the Eagles and not the Jets who will be picking at that spot. I mean, it seems that another day, another person just thinks that this is going to happen, and you just said you believe that will be a disastrous.
I do, and 100% certainty on March 5th is, that's ridiculous because there's a lot of ways another team could want to jump in for a different player for the Jets, or the Jets can fall in love with a position player. So that kind of hyperbole I don't put a lot of stock into, but it's clear. I mean, it's clear he loves Mariota as a player. It's clear that he thinks very highly of him as a person. That, to me, it doesn't necessarily equate to 2 versus 2, equals 4. It doesn't necessarily mean just because he likes him as a player, just because he had a lot of success with him at the college level, that he's willing to mortgage the entire future of his organization. I hope that's the case. I hope that's his thought process. And if he started to fall and he moved to, 13, 14, even 10, 11, and you make a trade up for less, then you revisit and say maybe it's a good move. But for some of these deals that people are throwing around with 3 or 4 number 1 picks and some of the big name ascending players on the Eagles like Fletcher Cox, I mean, that kind of stuff doesn't make a lot of sense. And that would strike me as reckless. But, just because people think it, and he, the one thing I'll say is there's no question he has a history, obviously, with wanting Oregon players, and to be perfectly blunt, I think he has to overcome that. I think he has to get away from that. But when you're bringing in, players again and again just because you coached them in college, that's not a good formula for long-term success. But this is all uncharted waters. I mean, Chip Kelly's never done this before, and nobody really knows what he's going to do. But at this point, as far as moving on from the veteran players, I think those moves made a lot of sense.
Let me ask you this question, obviously of strictly opinion, but who do you think's a better fit, Cobb or Maclin here?
Well, I think Randall Cobb's just a better player, and he can do so many things. He's a great kick returner too, so I think he can help you in that aspect of it. He's proven to be, if not, he's certainly amongst the top 3 or 4 slot receivers in the NFL, but he can also go outside the numbers, so he's very versatile as far as being able to line up. Now, the second part of that is, though, he's played with Aaron Rodgers, so I think if you look at Greg Jennings and how dominant he was as a Packer, and then he moved on to Minnesota, and all of a sudden he's got, Christian Ponder throwing them the ball, Matt Castle, not nearly as dominant. So I think you put that into the equation, too, and understand that anybody who plays with Rodgers is going to put up big numbers. But as a whole, I just think Cobb is more versatile.
Yeah, that's interesting, and you wonder if Maclin fits into the, hey, I got as far as I could with Andy's guys, and that's as far as we can get. Sorry, going to try to get my own guy. Thank you for your service here. It's becoming more and more likely looking like, hey, I got as far as I could with these guys. I gave you 2 years. If you want me to do what I want to do, you got to let me use my own guys, and that Lurie has given him his blessing.
Yeah, well, he has, and he almost had to because, I wrote about that earlier in the offseason when Howie lost the sort of the power struggle. I mean, there was no other way Lurie could go because they changed the entire culture, not only as far as the offensive philosophy, but if you think about all the things behind the scenes as far as, the sports science and even things as goofy as the music at practice or the smoothies, they've changed the entire culture of that organization. So to say after 2 years, you know what, we're done with that, we're going to go back to a more traditional approach, that would have been disastrous. So I think Jeffrey Lurie had to give him the rope, and now, he might hang himself with that rope. And, if he does make the move up for Marcus Mariota at number 6, I think the one guy who'll be smiling besides Chip Kelly is Howie Roseman, because he'll see that as an inside track of getting back to power.
John McMullen, the NFL editor, SportsNetwork.com. And obviously, you look at what Philadelphia has done over the last 48 hours. It has been a whirlwind. They're going to have tons of cap space and possibly more. Do you think there are more possible cuts coming in the next couple of days?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible. Like I said, Evan Mathis, because if you think about, his age, very similar to Harriman's, very similar to Cole's, over 30, big cap number, and he's wanted more money. So even though he's played at a high level, also coming off the injury last year, so you place that. He's kind of an off-the-radar guy because he's still, a Pro Bowl level player. But, clearly the way the NFL looks at, plus 30 guys, and the fact that you make that much money, he could be another one. And as I said, D'Amico Ryans, to me, the die is cast there. I don't think there's any question he's not going to be back now. So if they make both of those moves, you're talking about over $50 million in cap space, and then you can do basically whatever you want free agency. But, Eagles fans will know about that. You don't have to go back very far and think about the dream team. Just bringing in sort of a fantasy football team and plucking big names generally doesn't work in the NFL.
Yeah, there's a lot to support that. And also, you look on the flip side, the year that they brought T.O. in and they brought Curse in, that helped them out immensely. And it was kind of, I think it really depends on where your franchise is. If you're a 4-win team and you're looking to buy your way to 12, that's tough. If you're a 10-win team and you're looking to buy your way to 12, it might be a better way to go. And maybe Chip says, look, I got 10 with this crew. I need guys that can get me to 12, because obviously the road is a lot easier, which leads us to Foles. Your anticipation that Foles will be back is?
I think he will, because I think I think at the end of the day it'll be too costly to go up and get Mariota. I don't think they'll do it because me as a personal evaluation, I don't think he belongs in the first 2 picks of the draft. But I think he's such a high character kid. I think people love him off the field so much, and they love his work ethic. I think most people in the NFL think even though he is a project, he will eventually succeed. And that, to me, with the position he plays, somebody's going to take a chance somewhere in the top 10. So I don't know if the Eagles are equipped to get up there and go get him. And that would lead, another year with Nick Foles. And I don't think that would be the worst thing in the world, because obviously he doesn't make a lot of money. He's still on his rookie deal. And if you think about the success of the Seattle Seahawks, a big part of that fact is the fact that they hit on Russell Wilson in the 3rd round, and they could use the assets you normally pay a quarterback to go get other players and field probably the deepest team in the NFL.
Does that hurt Foles' trade? I mean, is it hard to move him because he's on that last year of his deal? Does that make him harder to move if teams are interested in him?
A little bit, because people understand, if you have a good season, you're going to cash in, and you're going to cash in big at the quarterback position. And that's something the Seahawks are going to see, because they have to extend Russell Wilson. All of a sudden, the guy you've been paying $750,000 to is going to make over $20 million. So I'm not saying Foles is going to reach that stratosphere, because that's unlikely. But if he were to play well next year in a trade and go somewhere as a starter, and even be above average, well, all of a sudden you're on that second contract. You're going to make, over $10 million most likely. So that's part of it, and that's why, cap guys in this league, they're not just thinking about 2015. They have to think about 2016, 2017, even 2018.
Do you wonder if the day after the Eagles and Buffalo make a deal, they trade for Castle, if there was any discussion for Nick Foles in those discussions?
No, I think the Bills wanted Josh McCown first. That was pretty clear. And then once he went to Cleveland, Castle was definitely their plan B. I think their mentality is they still have hopes for E.J. Manuel, and obviously it's a new regime there. And they wanted a more veteran guy who's proven to be a good mentor, and Matt Castle's certainly done that. He did a good job with Teddy Bridgewater last year, and that's the kind of guy they wanted to bring in, hoping to help E.J. Manuel in his development.
John McMullen, the NFL editor, SportsNetwork.com, on a week where the Eagles really grabbed the headlines in just about every way possible. We'll see if they grab them again next week during free agency. John, we'll talk to you then.